Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. Been a while, hasn't it? Today we're playing Dashat Company versus generic PanOceania, and the scenario is acquisition. Now, a quick note on scenario: we are playing with no ITS seasonal extras. So, although this is for all other purposes Season 15 acquisition, there will be no QAZ creatures, for example, and that's just something that we're doing locally, and which I think I recommend if you are one of those people that is getting back into the game, or even just didn't play the game for a few months during the long lead up to release. Just taking the mental load off, not having to deal with all of the new stuff in the game, as well as particularly some of the high octane weirdness that was introduced in ITS Season 15, can make things just a little bit easier. So, with that said, let's jump into the lists. So it should be no surprise that the first list I wanted to play back as I jump into N5 was going to be either Toha or Dashat Company, and Dashat Company had just a few things that were interesting and were better suited to acquisition as a scenario. They're very good at it, particularly in N5, and are also a little bit less of a mental load to place upon my poor opponent, Kyle. So this is the list that I'm running, and this is different by Dashat Company list standards, but it is making maximal use of a few of the things that were added to the edition that I think are a really big deal for Dashat Company in N5. And so what we have is we have a Magariba Guard. Like the starting point in that this is a Magariba Guard. Dashat Company does not need to run Magariba Guards, but it only has so much heavy firepower otherwise. For example, Zuyongs are just generic HMGs, and you can only push their damage that high. And so just start with a Magariba Guard, and it has baggage. Now, I think you will be able to play Dasher Company without Magaribas. There are other things that you can do, other ways that you can play them. There are some interesting asymmetric options, etc. But I think you will see a Magariba Guard in at least a fair few Dashat Company lists early on in the edition, particularly given how much its point has changed. Now, from here, in the remainder of Combat Group 1, we have a Digger, which can be duoed with the Magariba, and I deployed it to, and then I forgot to duo it. No big deal, it's just some corner guard deployment zone. 14 points, could be cut, but I really want to make sure I can buy a first turn with this list. We then have a Zencha Hacker. The Zencha is one of those pieces that got a significant glow up. 34 points for the Zencha now that it has upgrade Trinity is just eminently more reasonable. Yes, climbing plus being changed is a little bit of a blow for the Zencha. Yes, the boarding shotgun being changed is a little bit of a blow for the Zencha, but I don't remember how much this piece used to cost. It doesn't cost that anymore. 34 points I can afford. Now, I was a little bit sad to take this profile because the Zencha Mine Layer 2 is just wonderful and hilarious. But I did not, for my first game with Dashat, want to pass up on access to Trinity and access to a second hacker, and that would end up being quite significant. I love the other Zencha profile, I will definitely use it, but I think this was the sensible bet. We then have the first of two Mimetism 3 Mine Layer Libertos. Now, I think with the Libertos, depending on how you want to use them, there is a definite place to either go with the Chain Colt template and Submachine Gun for more offensive use, trading, they can still fork, etc. Or in this instance, I had the SWC, but more importantly, the Zencha was bringing no mines. And because the Zencha was bringing no mines, no mine laying, I wanted to be able to have mines as deployable elements. Because again, I just need to survive whatever the Alpha Strike is going to be. Because if I survive the Alpha Strike with this list, I can build a defense that is actually really solid turn on turn. Now, I mentioned the first of two Libertos. Next up, we also have the first of two 15-point Monstruckers. Now, if you have watched the 5-hour N5 hot takes video, you will know that I spent a little bit of the early time complaining about how Dashat did not have access to this profile, and then on loading Army to have a look at Dashat during the video, I discovered that literally while we were recording, it had been added to Army for Dashat, and my exuberance is palpable. I like this profile a lot. Now, it's just a submachine gun with a chain rifle, but even a submachine gun and chain rifle means that if you need to do some fighting or go down fighting, you have access to that. What really makes the Monstrucker special, in addition to things like climbing pluses and mobility, etc., it is the ability to just build a perimeter and be a specialist. An engineer is a good specialist in acquisition, part of what motivated me to play Dasher in this scenario. But if you have access to some baggage and you have orders spare, those Monstruckers can throw out drop pairs and they can place turrets, then they can reload for free at the end of the turn. And even with just a couple of orders each on a couple of Monstruckers, you can build a defensive network, which if it is not completely unpicked, you just re-establish the same way the next turn, and you can play this longer game of really just like strong, ablative defenses that you can just rebuild thanks to the fact that there are apparently 3 or 4 of those turrets hanging off the back of the Magariba and the baggage bot. We then have McMurrah, he is still good. And then finally, a 4-person link team that was the last minute inclusion in this list. This is like the 3rd iteration of this list, but I really wanted to try Miranda. Miranda Ashcroft is another one of those pieces that got a shocking glow up in the edition. Now, a couple of things changed about her. Firstly, the equipment loadouts are different, paramine, etc. But the emitter +1 burst is a burst 3 +1 special die from the link electromagnetic weapon with range bonuses that are equal to a HMG on a model with marksmanship and mimetism 6. Now she is just a single wound piece. She's a crit magnet. But for 28 points, like if you want to just deal with a tag in Dashat at range and you don't want to fight it with a Magariba, you just roll up with Gromos and you're like, yep, 32 inches, let's have a go. Ballistic skill 15 on you, no problem. You're down to 9s. I am 4 dice on 15s, you're 1 dice on 9s, Yotam or something. And those are electromagnetic rounds. Like, okay, I guess. That seems pretty good. Now, it's just a combi rifle for the rest of the package, but okay, if she has to go and fight things in the midfield, she's a combi rifle. Now, this link would absolutely benefit from a doctor because she is just single wound. I don't actually want this link to go in the midfield very much. This link is mostly going to be backfield support duty with her almost as an ARO piece, and in fact, she would be an ARO piece for most of this game. And the reason why I don't want to go into the midfield is that my sole Ghulam Lieutenant is in this link, and then we have the Ghulam NCO. So the rest of this link, and the reason why this link is a support link, is that we have Valeria Gromos, who's going to be throwing out pitches and doing hacking, and she doesn't really want to move into the midfield at all, because I can just yeet the pitches out at long range now, and the Ghulam NCO, who's doing the same thing with smoke grenades. This link, I liked it a lot, but I don't think I would like it if it had to really carry the game on its back. That's not its goal. Finally, in Combat Group 2, we have the second Libertos, the second Monstrucker, a Tractor Mule. This was important just for a second thing of baggage. Yes, you get a very big aura off the Magariba for baggage reloads, but its position is going to be dictated by terrain a lot because it has to be able to hide, and so you're not going to get that baggage everywhere. And because you're going to get that baggage everywhere, and you want to be able to reload both Monstruckers, just having a second baggage bot made sense. We then have a Fanus remote as another order, and a Rushi. Now the Rushi just fit into the list. It was a gunfighter. It has a mine dispenser, so it's one more piece that can be like, oh, I have an order spare, I'll throw out some mines, and I'll reload at the end of turn. And I would do that over the course of this game. And since I have 2 engineers that are running around doing things, having combat remotes makes a lot of sense. Now, a way that you can vary this list in addition to, like, for example, if you were to trim mines off of a Monstrucker, trim out Miranda Ashcroft, you can do things like get an Evo hacker in, get a second combat remote in. That combat remote can be a Long Yar, which is very solid this edition. They are just cheap and quite good, both profiles. You can have a long range Thunderbolt or a shorter range Mark 12, but they're both burst 4, burst 3 respectively, or burst 3, burst 4 respectively, and potentially even a Shehab. I am of the opinion that Evo hackers, at least initially, are probably going to be more important than they have ever been. Not because they're necessarily fantastic, but because they interfere with speedballs. And everyone is probably going to have some way to use a speedball, and so they will spend a command token on it. And that is immediately 2 opposing combat jumps that you can interfere with the Evo hacker. And if you have your own combat jump troopers, then you will be able to, by interfering with the enemy speedballs, get the support wear up because it is an ARO that then boosts your own combat jump troopers. So Evo hackers just cancelling each other out is something that it's very possible will exist over the course of this edition, and coincidentally, Evo hackers are baggage, which many lists will be able to make use of. So if I had the points and the SWC, I could, for example, trade the Tractor Mule out for a baggage Evo hacker. I haven't done so because I didn't have the points or the SWC, but it's a way that you could change this list. Now, for my opponent, Kyle's PanOceania list, this is not an optimized list. This is a bunch of things that looked cool and would be relatively straightforward to play because, like many of us, including to an extent me, Kyle learned that N5 was coming, had a bunch of life stuff on, decided that he would be playing again when N5 came out. And then N5 was delayed, and then it was delayed again. So Kyle has really only had so much opportunity to play in sort of the last little while. And so this list is built to not be aggressively complicated, and in fact be a little bit unga bunga in terms of, hey, do you want some really, really good firepower and close assault, hackable close assault, but close assault, just backed up by a bunch of Fennec utility? Would it be good to get some things in here like, for example, drummers or peacemakers? Absolutely, peacemakers would be a good inclusion. You know, like a tech bee perhaps rather than one of the Fennecs, stuff like that. Yes, probably, but as a starting point, a learning point, this is a serviceable list. So what do we have? We have a motorized bounty hunter for 9 points. This is one of the remaining good close assault pieces, good enough close assault pieces that will potentially trade up and get value. Not just does it has booty, which can be quite high roll on a piece like an MBH, but it has that ability to fork both a burst 3 reasonable enough gun and a extra burst template weapon. We then have 2 Teutonic Knights, one of whom I believe was a specialist. This is me kind of rebuilding Kyle's list. Teutonic Knights are good, and Kyle is using them. We then have Joan of Arc, and this one threw me for a loop. I hadn't really gone and looked at Joan's profile. Like, I was leaning more towards things like the Hetkari, for example. That's a very, very good gun. But Kyle deployed her as one of the reserve drops, and I like almost pissed myself because he was just like, "Oh yeah, she's got these rules." I'm like, "Tactical awareness? No, no, no. You mean inspiring leadership?" No, no, no. She's got tactical awareness. Let me see the profile. Jesus, she's got tactical awareness, and I didn't expect her because, yep, Lieutenant Whipper Willpower 12. Oh, okay, cool. Joan drops down. Like, this is a trick. This is a trick. No, no, it's just Joan, because she's 45 points of incredible durability, high ballistic skill, armor piercing, close assault power with extra wound, like no wounding cap and 2 wounds. Like 45 points. And she has stealth. An amazing close combat and an excellent gun. Like, yes, she has frenzy, but once you get to this kind of quality piece, frenzy does become, oh no, limited cover, I guess. Anyway, an extra order. Let's go. We then have a whole bunch of Fennecs. One of these would be a reserve drop alongside Joan, but it's triangulated fire, mine layers, disco ballers, hackers. Just these are good profiles. The mine layers in particular are. I mentioned that I think peacemakers are an excellent addition in literally any list that can take them. If you are trying to be a little bit simpler, you're trying to make sure you've got some backup guns for very cheap, and you just want a little bit of deployment zone mine layer stuff to just have that extra layer of insulation, 14 points for a Fennec is excellent, so fair enough. We then have a magistrate combining chain of command and counterintelligence, 21 points. Not exactly a steal. I'm not sure I would necessarily pay that much for like all of that as a package, but we have a important lieutenant, not necessarily vulnerable lieutenant, an important lieutenant in this list, and counterintelligence is excellent. Then we have a 360 visor. In combat group 2, our other irregular troopers are here, but we have a Blade FTO duoed with a Tick Belang. Now, there is a very small scornergy here. The +1 order Tick Belang is often going to have to break that duo in order to, spend its lieutenant orders. Now, oh no, the problem that we have is the 4 extra order. Like, those 2 troopers have 2 tack aware, 2 regular orders, and 2 lieutenant orders. Yes, you will have to break the link and then potentially reform it in order to maximize the value out of that, which requires command tokens, etc., which are a little bit thin on the ground if you're speedballing. But that's just a ton of fire support on a very, slim package. And so, rounding out the list and this combat group, we have a Fugazi Dronbot for an extra order and 2 Helots. I actually only saw one of these during the course of the game, but I am pretty sure, given the way the points work, that the second one would be a shock marksman rifle, because the first one was a light rocket launcher and 13 points were left in the list, but it could have been either. Helots are, I will note, at this points cost, these are much more reasonably costed. These models, particularly the light rocket launcher, would have previously cost, I think, 9 points, but half an SWC. Now, this list is not spending all of the SWC, so your choice around Helots, you no longer have that choice where it's like, oh, I can have the cheap one that costs SWC, or the expensive one that doesn't cost SWC. Now they're both kind of the same, and yes, you can tweak them for that last point in the list, but otherwise you make the call based on the weapon loadout that you need. The rocket launcher is more dangerous thanks to continuous damage and the template. The shock marksman is more likely to win face-to-face rolls. I'm not sure where I sit on the two of them, but the range bands on the light rocket launcher might still make it the more attractive profile. It's close. Now, jumping into the game. Kyle wins the lieutenant roll, I roll a 4, he rolls a 5, he wins the roll, snap picks first turn, perfectly serviceable choice in acquisition, probably the correct choice, and I elect to deploy second on the left table side on the grounds that it has slightly better access to especially the central console late in the game. So if we look at the table, we have some high ground kind of set out here, and the high ground is very accessible. You can reach it via a number of different ramps. So there are something like 5 or 6 paths that you can take to actually get up onto this high ground. But once you are on the high ground, it is semi-enclosed. The high spaces on the high ground are fairly commanding firing positions. Of course, we have this central tower here. But the low ground on the high ground, for lack of a better term, these alleyways here, are relatively sheltered. Otherwise, we just have a bunch of the usual buildings all put together to make kind of interesting geometric shapes that you can move up and over and around. So for example, this building over here on the bottom right of the screen, you can move up over the various different ladders, and then you can take those over the gantry way. You can get down multiple different ways. This is how I like to build this table. People who've watched this channel will have seen this before. Now, Kyle spent a command token to hold back an extra model. So the two models he would be reserving are Joan and a Mine Layer Fennec. The Mine Layer Fennec was just in case of bullshit. Joan was because she is Joan. And so for Kyle's deployment, he's put down his two helots. One is on this building here, one is on this staircase, both with good views into the midfield, but not exceeding their 24-inch range band. They will always be fighting in good range. The tick belang is deployed very safely back here in the deployment zone, with the blade not far away. The Fennecs are scattered around. We have one of the mine layer Fennecs over, I think it's over here, with its mine placed relatively far forward. Maybe another one that is placing its mine back near the tick belang. Yeah, so the reserve drop would eventually come down here with its mine further forward, but it was ready to be an emergency reserve drop. The Teutons are deployed as far forward as they can. One is hanging out near this, behind this sort of little sign here, and another one is over around somewhere near it'll be down here near these stairs, ready to move forward and around up through these alleyways. The motorized bounty hunter here is doing the same. It's just in a position, if it doesn't have to do anything, it won't do anything, but if it moves out, it's got some clean, impetuous movements into the midfield before it starts making a run towards my deployment zone. The magistrate and the hacker are both hanging out down here in the bottom right corner. They have paths up and around the table via these stairways and over this building. They will be relatively safe unless I make an assault up through this sort of like the bottom part of the table here, at which point they could be kind of vulnerable. So in short, we have two aggressively staged Teutonic Knights. Eventually Joan will deploy here and aggressively stage Joan, and a more conservative Tick Belang, with the note that the Tick Belang has so many orders, even in the second combat group, that it's going to be quite easy for it to move forward, take some shots, and pull back if it needs to. Now, for my part, I am deployed just to contest the advance and sacrifice Libertos to buy myself a first turn. I have a smattering of camouflage markers all centered around these two consoles, because I'm not quite as worried about an advance up and around this direction here. Yes, a Teutonic Knight could feasibly make that movement, but I have a means of stopping that. So Libertos and Mine Layers all the way scattered around this area here, in kind of close order, and the Zensha hacker is on this rooftop, just being an annoying piece in case something moves in or around this objective marker. The Magariba Guard will be reserve dropped way back here on the back table edge. It's got a line up into the center, so for example, anything that comes down these stairs toward my deployment zone or up and over this building to look down at things will be engaged by the Magariba, and importantly, the Magariba is in a position where it can pull back into total cover after a face-to-face roll or two. The Digger is deployed on my right side of the table, just in case the Bounty Hunter or something decides to come around this direction toward the Magariba. Teuton the same. I just want to make sure that it's not easy for the heavy infantry to move forward and attack me. And then I have some repeaters positioned to punish any attempt to extend. So the first Fugazi is very aggressively positioned on the 16-inch line over here, so that anything that is fighting the Libertos or the Zensha or the Digger is going to be in repeater area. And then the Rushi is down here doing something basically similar. Anything that moves through or around the high ground is going to be moving through repeater area. The baggage bot is down here along with the 4-person core link and the first of 2 monstruckers, so it's quite close to the baggage if I need it to. And then the second monstrucker is hanging out in this building. It is away from the Magariba's baggage, but I expect the Magariba to move forward, so it will be able to reload if it needs. McMurray is just hanging out literally on the back table edge over here. And that is because black air parachutist deployment zones are a thing that exists. And so between the Magariba and McMurray, I basically have most of the deployment zones where the black air would be threatening pretty much covered. There is terrain on both sides of the table that sort of block the longest lines of fire, but the Magariba is tall enough to see over them, and so I just have coverage against the black air. Although by the time Kyle puts down his reserve drops, I know that one is not coming because I've seen 15 troops. Oh, the war correspondent, which will be a huge pain in my ass, is on this tall building in sort of like the center left of Kyle's deployment. And so this battle of fish versus fish begins with Kyle advancing his Teutonic Knights very aggressively. He kind of just makes the call, he looks at the midfield, he says there are 2 Libertos out there, and so I am just going to have to go and deal with those Libertos. And Teutonic Knights in N5 are pretty damn good at dealing with Libertos. Because Libertos don't get to just sort of like template them for free, and because they dodge so well, Teutonic Knights can move forward and take those fights really kind of cleanly. Worst case scenario, they might take a wound from a mine or something somehow, but they're well suited to it. So both of the Teutonic Knights will be advancing relatively aggressively, and both of them will ultimately end up taking very similar fights. The first knight will come up and around this direction. It will move through. There are 2 camouflage markers here. One of them is a mine, one of them is a Libertos, but from different combat groups. And the knight will end up triggering the mine, and then moving on, engaging and attacking the Libertos, wounding it, taking a wound in return to the mine, I think in this particular case, and dealing with the Libertos. Similar vein, this knight will be moving up and around here, triggering a mine, provoking a Libertos who lays another mine, moving into close combat with a Libertos who lays a mine, and so it will take wounds as it moves in and deals the kill, but both knights will deal with both Libertos, admittedly at a cost of significant orders. Now, at that point, you might be thinking, oh, that's relatively clean. Didn't you say that you had a repeater network set up to kind of stop these attacks? Yeah, I did. And I made the decision I wanted to just keep the Zensha reserved and safe because it had Trinity and because Kyle had a hacker. I didn't want to reveal the Zensha early. That may actually have been a mistake, but I felt that it was important enough. Let's be honest, I wanted to use it, and because I wanted to use it, I didn't want to reveal it early. Because I didn't want to reveal it early, I took all of my AROs with Valeria Gromos, who missed and missed and missed and missed and missed, with Whip 14 Carbonites over and over and over and over and over. I think she whiffed 5 Carbonites over the course of the first turn. Now, that is a little bit grim, but it's a game of 2 halves, and as things got unlucky for me, so too would they get lucky later in Kyle's first turn. The knights moved up, they took their kills, one of them did eventually get immobilized, but they took out the Libertos, which is what Kyle wanted to do just to clear up the midfield. That's all Combat Group 1 stuff. Joan would move forward with her Tackaware order, but most of the orders that were spent would be spent on the Teutons. Some would be spent on the Motorized Bounty Hunter as well, I think this turn, just to move forward and stage, but it wouldn't make an attack yet. For the second combat group, the Tikbalang and the Blade begin to move up. Now, small kind of play error here that we just would move past. This was probably the time to place the speedballs. Kyle rolled up his speedball. He chose the +1 structure repair for the Tikbalang and rolled up the reset effect, the one that cancels immobilized, isolated, or stunned. And he would, on his next turn, drop those down so that both Joan and the Tikbalang could pick up their respective speedball. He would succeed with both. But if he had done that in the first turn, that would have changed the plays that he was able to make. He didn't. That was a misplay. We didn't really think of it. We kind of had to learn these mechanics as we went. Nevertheless, many orders on the Tikbalang, and so the Tikbalang and the Blade tromple out, moving up here, intending to move up and engage the Magariba. And so both of them move up and around, spending a combination of tactical awareness and regular orders, and the Tikbalang at this point to engage the Magariba moves out, spent its lieutenant order, up and over here to engage the Magariba, at which point the Magariba crits it on an 11 and it fails 3 of its 4 saves. And so for all that Valeria Gromos failed something like 4 successive Carbonite attempts even to hit against Teutons, this is officially the point that I am no longer able to complain about my bad luck on the first reactive turn, because the Tikbalang going from full health to unconscious was a very large problem. Now, it was a solvable problem because even though the link was broken, it would have been broken anyway. If it had had the speedball, would have recovered back up to 1 wound, and we would have had to stop and think about the timing of that and whether or not that breaks the link or not. As it was, Kyle just moved the blade up and repaired it, and then with an order left, repaired it again. So at this instance, the tick belang was back on its feet with only having taken 1 wound, but Kyle did not have enough orders left after doing that with the blade to continue to commit with the engagement with the tick belang. And because it was important, powerful, strong piece and fast, the correct play was to pull it back, leaving the blade in the midfield, which would be just fine. The tick belang took one more engagement with the Magariba guard, and it would wound the Magariba guard in the process, and then it would move back and down, and it would end up not quite in ideal cover, but hanging out kind of back here, not in cover from this direction, but in cover from, for example, the Magariba or Miranda, if either of them went after it. So as far as first turns go, I've taken casualties. All of my mines have been defanged, and both of my Libertos are dead. That is pretty tolerable. The Magariba guard is also wounded. That is pretty tolerable. But just in terms of how much worse things could potentially have been, I am fine with it, particularly given that this list builds a defensive network like a champ once it gets its first turn. So my priority for my first turn is mostly just to deal with these Teutonic Knights in particular. Anything else that I can is a bonus, but the Teutonic Knights are the most important, and then to set up all of the defenses that will begin to get me through the remainder of the game. And so that pretty much is the turn. The Magariba Guard will move out, and it will just whiff a whole bunch of face-to-face rolls trying to deal with the War Correspondent, but it will eventually put the War Correspondent down. It will put down the Teuton that made its way into this part of the table to engage the Libertos, and then it will put down the Teuton over here that moved up to kill the other Libertos and got hacked. Good enough of an outcome. Took a lot of orders to deal with all three, but those are the only 3 kills I will get over the course of the turn. The Magariba will end up over here behind this building, at which point I will go, can we just pretend I wind that back for a second, because I have remembered that I need to do a speedball, and so I put my speedballs down. I roll up, I choose the auto repair kit for the tag, and I roll up the stun reset as well. I fail both of them, but that doesn't matter, it uses the combat jump rules, so each of them will walk on, it will appear on my board edge, is my understanding of how speedball works, as it follows the combat jump rules. And so McMurray gets access to the reset effect, and the Magariba gets access to a wound repair effect, which won't matter for this turn. So the Magariba will end up, behind this building over here, I think, maybe tucked in sort of slightly further around, having laid down some mines and otherwise done some killing. We have orders left, in particular, we have some effective, irregular orders, etc. as well, and those will mostly be spent building the defensive network. So Gromos is going to take control of this link. There are two Ghulams in it, so it has link bonuses. She will stand up, move up onto this staircase, and after 2 attempts, she will fire a pitcher that gets down into just this little nook and cranny here. Now, how pitchers work, if you're not familiar with them, and how all deployable equipment works with link bonuses, is that the link bonuses add a special die, which does not consume disposable charges. So Gromos will roll 2 dice, in this instance at that range needing 8s. 2 dice on 8s is actually a fairly good chance to succeed. And making that roll consumes 1 charge per pitcher. She misses the first time, then she goes and sits back down. I actually think she succeeds. So she succeeds the first time, she lands it there, she has odds to do so. She puts a second repeater down in this nook over here, and then she drops prone to do that. I don't spend the NCO order, I actually forget to. I should have just to fire a spec fire, didn't matter, not the end of the world. With the last regular order in this group, Gromos makes 1 Carbonite attempt against Joan and actually succeeds. Excellent, Carbonite's Joan. All of the rest of the orders that are spent in Combat Group 1, which is just, it's just an irregular order, and that is just on this Monstrucker, which puts down a turret, and it will reload for free at the end of the round. So that turret, I think, gets put down over here, watching this angle up that way, just building a little bit of security, and it's an AP rifle turret, so it's dangerous enough. Combat Group 2, we then have the Rushi move around here, and then up and around here to engage the Tick Belang. I only really have 1 order that I can do this with, because I've lost the Libertos, etc., but I do have enough orders to move it out, throw out some mines, move it around and engage the tick belang exactly once, and I will do another wound to the tick belang, but just another wound. The tick belang will otherwise be in fine enough shape, and it will guts forward into cover and out of line of sight. Otherwise, I have an irregular order left in that combat group, and that will be spent on the Monstrucker, who will lay down a turret and then for free reload off of the Magaruba Guard in the States phase. And so that means, if we fast forward now to the beginning of round 2, we can see the defenses that have been put up. There is a mine over here. There is a deployable turret over here. There is a mine over here and a pitcher over here. There is another mine up here. There is a deployable, there is a repeater here and another deployable turret here. That is an awful lot of material, right? That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 7 pieces of material, including armor-piercing armed turrets, mines, and repeaters that have been spewed out into the midfield by this list, admittedly taking plenty of orders to do so, but over the course of a turn in addition to doing other things. So this whole defensive network has been re-established, and now Kyle needs to face check his way through it again. Now, he can do so, but he is beginning to run out of options and material, particularly since he needs to recover certain things. So what do? Well, first thing he does is he lands his speedballs. Joan picks up her immunity to EM for a round. Yep, not a fan of that. Oh, the other thing that is relevant about this turn is that I have realized how good of an ARO piece Gromos is, and she has stood up as part of those orders that move Miranda around. How good of an ARO piece Miranda is, and she has stood up as part of the orders that have moved Gromos around. So Kyle is down a few orders and down a few resources, but there is enough to unpick what is going on. The motorized bounty hunter will make a run this turn. It will move up and around, and it will try and deal with the armor-piercing turret. It will go crit and go unconscious. Okay, that's fine. The blade pulls up and around and manages to fix the status on Joan. Now, if the speedball had been called down earlier, she would have just recovered from that automatically, but it means that she would not have the speedball for the subsequent engagements, which is going to be important because it turns out that trying to fight Gromos with literally any of the guns that Kyle has in his army is a terribly fraught proposition. Nevertheless, Joan will attempt to do a few different things. Mostly she and the blade, she need to clear out this repeater. And so the blade will end up coming up and around. There are some stairs here that it can use. It will come around and it will destroy the repeater so that Joan can advance, except that it will have to die in order to do so because there are turrets and mines and all of these sorts of things, so the blade goes down. Joan moves up and finishes off the turret and clears more of the path to make space sort of available for this center area, but Kyle is just hemorrhaging piece after piece. The only casualty he will inflict on me this turn is he will put the Rushi down with the Tick Belang, unsurprisingly. But otherwise, all of the stuff he is doing is just to peel away this ablative layer that I have built, which I have just reloaded entirely off of free baggage reloads at the end of turn. Now I spent orders to build this ablative defense. Kyle is spending orders to unpick it, but he's also having to spend troops and assume risk. And if these turrets get just a single wound, then okay, cool. I spent some orders, you spent some orders, you took a wound, I lost material that I reloaded for free. And that is the story of this turn. Now, he will make progress. Over the course of this turn and next turn, he will be able to press both of the buttons, which will be on me to then deal with, but I do have the last turn advantage in this scenario. And in acquisition, you have an offensive advantage because of how close the deployment zones are, but it is still an end of round scoring game. And so, when I roll into my second turn, I kind of have the luxury of just rebuilding all of these defenses again. Now, I do take some offensive actions. Kyle has moved his Fennec Hacker around to press this button, and I will reveal the Zencha, and I will kill it. The Magaruba Guard will move around and do a little bit of work. It will throw out some more mines because it reloaded itself. It will end up going into Suppressive Fire, watching the center button. I will, because Valeria Gromos reloaded herself for free, I will have her stand back up and re-establish all of those pitches that were such a pain for Kyle to deal with the turn before. I won't actually get a ton more kills this turn. I won't do a ton of damage, but Kyle's attacks are bleeding him out trying to attack me. He is getting up on scenario, but my plan is to deal with all of that in the final turn. And so we head now just straight into the final turn because my second turn was primarily about just rebuilding a status quo that favored me, and we can see once again there is a turret down here. There is a mine down here that the Monstrucker has placed using drop bears. The repeater here is back. There is a mine over here again. There is another turret here in addition to the one that is up here from last turn. There is a mine over here because it hasn't been deleted yet. And so all of this material, once again, is just in the midfield. And those turrets are armed and dangerous. And Kyle is now just kind of running out of pieces that can do all of the work that he needs to. And so Joan did a bunch of work during his second turn. She's going to move up and try and do that work again. The Tickblang is going to do the same. But he has to now just try and get the points onto the scenario zones that he can in order to secure the game to the extent that might be possible. I have done a spotlight during the course of my last turn in ARO. I spotlighted his motorized bounty hunter as it moved up to try and engage the turret and died. And so Kyle's entire turn, this turn, basically is clearing a path for and getting Joan into the midfield. The Tickbalang will contribute, the orders that Kyle has will contribute. She will eventually have to run around this corner onto the objective. She will split her Spitfire burst, 1 dice into each turret, 2 dice into the Mega Reaver. She will actually entirely survive. She will deal 1 wound and take 1 wound over the course of that engagement because she's a ballistic skill 15 AP Spitfire. She's like damn good. But she will just get there. She's not safe there. I have too much left. The Tickbalang is not really able to move into a position where it can seriously support her. It will attempt to, but doesn't have the orders to really suppress things. And so with a Tickbalang, I think, ending up in this position here, with Joan here, I now just collapse on this with my entire army. I take them out, I destroy them, I lay down smoke because there are still some helots there, and the first monster gets across this gap under the cover of smoke. The smoke is coming from the grenade launcher, by the way. 2 dice on, I think at that range it was 2 dice on 8s. Spend the orders that you need to, get the smoke down, move the Monstrucker across the gap, press this button, secure this objective. Similarly, move a model up and around. I can't remember what it actually was. It would have been one of the Link team members, actually. They decamp and move in this direction, up and around over here. They get across the gap, lay some smoke down because there are, again, helots watching, get onto the central console, and then I end up having to force the issue around here with a Monstrucker. It is able to get around onto this objective, and it is able to press the button, but it dies to helot fire in the process of attempting to press the button. So this is not a clean sweep, but I do have the central objective taken for 3, the bottom objective both activated and controlled for 3, my classified done for 1, and the top objective, I can't remember if it is 1 point to activate, 2 points to control, or vice versa. I think it's 2 points to activate, but either way, this is an 8 or 9 point win to me, and a 1 or 2 point to Kyle. Now, as a broad conclusion, how do I feel about things that were at play here? The fact that the game was live all the way until turn 3, I think in part was predicated on the fact that we completely forgot about Speedball for the first turn of the game, and in part was predicated on the fact that I built my list to play that way, and in part was predicated on the fact that Kyle really just built a list that would be straightforward to play and for him to learn with. I think you could absolutely optimize that PanOceania list to be more dangerous. As for the turrets, I don't know how I feel about them. Or more specifically, I am conflicted because I enjoyed them a lot. Like placing them, perimeter area, reloading for free, doing it again next turn. That was awesome. I wonder how I will feel to play against it. The perimeter deployment is so flexible, lets you deploy those turrets from pretty much complete safety, then reload for free. And the thing about those turrets is that they take 1 order to place, and then you reload for free. They often take more than 1 order to kill if you deploy them correctly, because your opponent has to position to destroy and engage them. And if the turret gets lucky, that is catastrophic. And that is such a high value for a single order on my part that I think we are going to have to develop some tactics for dealing with these things. Whether it is to bring Apex gunfighters that are so powerful that they can comfortably engage 2 turrets at the same time, for example, or we build techniques that are just highly asymmetric that don't involve playing against the things, or we even just get used to assassinating baggage bots, because that's going to be what you have to do some of the time if your opponent is running a really turret-heavy tactic. I have wanted to see deployable turrets in the game, like for as long as I've been playing Infinity. They're such a cool concept. I play an engineer in every first-person shooter that gives me the option of playing an engineer. I do think we have to learn how to play with these things. I am not I don't like Speedball. I think Speedball is a bad mechanic, and I wish it wasn't in the game. We will learn to deal with that. I like turrets. We will have to see how we learn to deal with them. Ultimately, they are a defensive tool, and I am not opposed to anything that makes Infinity games last for 3 turns. This game lasted for 3 turns. It was live all the way up until the end. If we had called it at the end, like at the beginning of the final round, Kyle, at any point prior to my last turn, Kyle would have won. He was ahead the entire game in a scenario, admittedly, that is scored at the end of the game. The moment-to-moment action was excellent. Infinity is a great game for that. Once I got used to it, I even liked the fact that the rolling probability of survival aligned with everything else. I loved the engagements between the Teutons and the Libertos. The fact that those heavily armored, dangerous, admittedly 18-point knights could move in, dodge mines, bait out the Libertos or deal with the Libertos, move in and engage the things without just getting templated felt clean and it felt like it's how things should go. Yeah, a model that costs twice as much as a Libertos should, with the expenditure of some orders, be able to move in, unpick, and deal with the Libertos. The Libertos, for its part, yes, it cost half as much, but it buys me that first turn. I was happy with all of that as an engagement. It felt really nicely dialed in. And it is good that things should feel that way. It's good that close combat models should be dangerous. It's good that your skirmishers should give you that layer. God, I hope they are able to against more lists. So a lot of what went down I liked. A lot of the moment-to-moment play, really, really nicely dialed in, really clean. Even just the way that all of the dice rolls, you're looking for the same kind of result every time. Low rolls under a certain number, excellent. Spotlight requiring a BTS roll did come up. It did matter. I failed one of the spotlights that I attempted in ARO because of the BTS roll. So just lots there, ultimately, lots there that felt really, really solid. Like I was really happy, like I was having a great time. I whinged for like the first 4 orders, missing all of those Carbonite AROs, but having a great time basically the entire way through the game, and everything felt really, really solid. Will keep my eye on just a few of those new elements that have been added to see how we learn to deal with them, but otherwise, really, really good game. As always, if you've enjoyed this, glad that you did. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below, or by becoming a channel member. Thanks to everyone who has so far. I take, as a reminder, video topic requests, battle report, factions to play, etc. from channel supporters, either those who donate via the Buy Me a Coffee page or people who are channel members. Always happy to listen to what the supporters want and what it is they'd like to see. Ultimately, I'm able to do this channel and make these videos because of you guys. In terms of future content, I will be trying to make more N3 battle reports. They're relatively straightforward, they're relatively easy, and they give me an opportunity to play N5 games. So expect to see some more of those. There will also be other content that's coming out. What I will probably not do is like a big what has changed in N5 explainer. Firstly, assembling that content would be a lot of work, and secondly, I think I can direct you to content written and more referenceable. I know that there are people who have put Google Docs together, and I also know that Goonhammer is working on a full article that lays all of that stuff out in a relatively digestible way. I will post that in the community section of the channel once it is published. That would be my recommended go-to for people who want a breakdown of everything that has changed. Otherwise, look, as always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.